Welcome to the Uber Mention podcast. I am your co-host, Just Jeremy, and joining us is Clayton Albrecht, our rock and roll co-host for the evening. That's right. Jake is, I don't know, Jake's out and about somewhere around.
He's a busy one.
He is a busy one. He's hard to keep.
He's a traveler.
Reeled in, that guy. So tonight, Clayton and I are going to continue to build on what we talked about with the Duality podcast, and that's such a big topic, and it plays into so many different areas that we're just going to kind of keep rapping in that direction and see what shakes out. But there's been some themes that are rising up in our lives that I think a lot of people are going to be able to identify with, and it's this tension, right? It's like somebody's stretching a rubber band further and further, and we've gotten about as far to the edge of that stretch as we can, and it's either going to snap. Well, yeah, I hope.
We hope.
Right. It's either going to snap or it's going to be let go, and either way you look at it, there's going to be a massive amount of space that's going to be filled very quickly because nature abhors a vacuum. So there will be no empty space. There can't be. It's going to be filled with something. And I think that's when we talked about duality, there's dark forces and there's light forces, and then there's pretty much everything in between. And what makes up the dark forces, man, we could get way out into the weeds on that topic. And the same with the light forces. I more and more, where I'm at is I'm not going down the dogma place. I'm not going to lay it at the feet of demonic entities any more than I'm going to lay anything at the feet of angelic entities. But I definitely can't dispute that there is evil in the world, however we want to define that, and that there is loving, the opposite end of that. And I would say that it's pretty clear the dark forces in this case are pretty much pure evil. Everything they do is inverting or distorting upside down, though, specifically inverting or distorting creation. And when I say creation, I'm not saying that from the Christian perspective. I'm saying it from God being the all. Like, God, to me, is all there is. We've talked about this in the previous episode. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. So, that's just operating from that headspace that, to me, there is no separation. There is only the all. It's man who sees the separation and, iterates accordingly our experience. So, but we didn't really get off into what we think this devil entity could be. And I do want to spend a little time on that. I do. And the reason I want to do that is because, it's nobody knows anything. We're all kind of giving our best guesstimate of what it is. And short of the people who have gone to some other realm and come back, which are few and far between, it's difficult to know for sure. So my take, anyway, on what this devil or all of the various incarnations that people seem to put together is definitely it's something that we have all put so much thought energy into, that we have given rise to something, to another entity. Could it be alien? Could it be interdimensional? Could it be I guess I don't know. I don't seek to label what its species is. I just don't believe that it's human. And I also don't believe that it has the power to co-create anything. It only has power in deception and maintaining a low level vibration, right? And so if I were this thing called the devil, I would definitely be seeking to become physically real. And I do believe that's that's a possibility. I don't know. Again, I don't want to get way too out in the weeds on this, but I think that in my own understanding, thoughts create power, but not just, every thought that you've ever had didn't come into manifestation, right? And that's, I know for me, I think of all kinds of things. I think of 27 different ways to solve one problem. So did all 27 of those ways manifest because I thought of them? No. It's what we put our action towards. That's the other part of the whole, the secret and the law of attraction, if you will, and all this manifesting stuff is we must take radical action in order to see it through. We just don't ever, for me, when I've manifested, like clearly manifested something, it never happens the way that I anticipated it. So there's that. And the more I've opened myself to how it can manifest, well, the more I real in my experience. So I think that that's what this devil thing could be, right? Is the manifestation of so many generations of collective attention being focused towards this opposer of God. But he doesn't really oppose God. He's just, or she or it or whatever it is, it is just like the inverter of things, that which turns everything upside down. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, boy, actually one night, if you recall, we were in the kitchen together, all of our family, and it unraveled itself within me. I think for that first time in my life, I was able to articulate from beginning to end a linear thought of what I thought that force that we call the devil, loosely, very loose descriptor is. Again, I know by saying devil, it's either triggering for people who are very adverse to any religion or mysticism or Christianity, or they feel like mentioning oh my gosh, and here we are, these guys are caught up in the hoopla too of the must defeat the forces of evil, right, Satan thing. Well, in a way, yes, but I'm going to allow myself to speak freely and just kind of try to unravel this thing once again. So to me, it seems that we are made up of a multitude of energies, right? And I believe very much in the energetic centers that are pointed to as like the 7 chakras, or chakra, whatever, these overlying, more encompassing energy centers, and all of these roots branching out from them. However, to simplify it, 7 different centers, let's say 7 different planetary forces. There's 7 repeats itself many times, but regardless, that we are made up. We can say let's just entertain the idea that we're made up of a bunch of multitude of energies, like contained in this one thing that we call a being, a man with a capital M, regardless of gender, a human being. I fancy the word man more because if we want to get into etymology, human can mean man.
That's right.
So man is made up of a bunch of multitude of energies that I feel are always want to seek authority and seek expression and rush the throne, so to speak. And it is up to us to balance them in the ways that we can and enact on the ones that feel appropriate for a given situation. We have 3 below our heart is kind of where they all meet, but in our heart is where they all meet. But the 3 below the heart we call the lower chakras, and words are tricky, y'all. Again, I'm going to say that probably a million times, how words are tricky. Spells, again, right? Words are worlds and whirls. So we write in cursive. We spell in cursive or curses and whirls, and it's a little more linear in right brain nowadays, at least in the way we write here in America, So, but getting back to, we have 3 lower chakras, the heart. Again, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is in our hearts. And then we have the 3 upper chakras. And when we hear those words upper and lower, we think of a hierarchy as in better than or less than, or good versus not good, It's tricky shit. But regardless, so going back to, we have a multitude of different energies, energy centers, each ploying for expression or dominance, perhaps over the rest, where it is maybe man's job and purpose to govern all of his inner sanctums and faculties, and again act on the ones that are appropriate at that time. It's been described to me through mysticism and other things that I have read that the lower chakra, say the root chakra, our bottommost chakra, is governed by the planet Saturn, as well as gravity. Let's look at the word Saturn and look how close it is to the word Satan. And the lower chakra, the root chakra, has more, it has in a positive aspects to do with grounding, power, which can be good or bad, and overall physicality, I would say. And I would say that Satan or Ahriman or Lucifer, they're really, if you really go deep enough into esoterics, there are three different godheads that make up this similar idea. And if we think of things, when I think of the beast, I picture physicality, right? Like all out physicality and gravity. Again, you mentioned inversion, the symbol for sin was a downward triangle, where the symbol for ascension was an upward triangle. If you put the two of them together, you have the Star of David, and the center of that is God, let's say, right? Maybe the center of that here in the heart, So perhaps these downward, inward, down-pointing forces that seek expression take dominance over us in this world of physicality and materialism. I mean, it's not that hard to look around to say, are we more of a spiritual culture, or are we more of a physical material culture? Like which one is prevailing right now, so to speak? Well, it seems very much that the world of materialism and the world of physicality is the norm, and that's what we're presented with and taught to observe the world through those senses, through physical senses, to fact check everything based upon physicality, and rounding off at best and at worst, leaving out and dismissing entirely our higher, more ethereal, perhaps intangible qualities, So perhaps it is, again, this lower aspect of ourselves that has tried to seek expression through us, and maybe it is represented by certain planetary forces like Saturn. Like, I don't condemn any planets for what they're doing. Like Mercury's in retrograde right now, which should be noted too. We'll get back to that with the tension that we're feeling. But I don't view Mercury as like an adversarial or like a bad thing. Actually, it could be looked at as an adversarial force in the same way that devil, or more specifically Satan, in Latin, I believe, means adversary. An adversary can also be a teacher. If you want to take the route of Lao Tzu, know thy enemy. Like thyself. My enemy is my friend. There's a lot to be learned from. But nevertheless, let's say this adversary has been ploying for supremacy above the rest of the systems, and maybe has duped humanity. It has been its ploy all along to, as you put it, to oppose God, what we associate God with, this higher sense of self. Again, they're just different parts of the spectrum, trying to get away from the duality of it all. But as far as physical expression, I'm with you. Like, I don't know. There seems to be evidences, certainly more and more, if people look enough into ancient civilizations and their accounts of different aliens or deities or godheads or what have you, of things that seem, as you put it, pretty evil, pretty adversarial. And thought is definitely a very powerful thing. I believe the heart of it, the point of this all, is we are manifesting beings. I believe thought precedes matter. Mind informs matter. Mind informs matter. You get?
Well, that's the first Hermetic principle. All is mind, and from that stems everything else, which makes perfect sense to me. Is that all is mind, but that doesn't mean. So, you wade between religion and New Age, And like New Age really just packages a lot of things that religion did first, and puts it in a package that says don't think about it and it won't happen. So like, just because we're talking about it right now, we're making it happen, man, because you're giving attention to it. Where attention goes, energy flows. Well, that's true. That's true. That is true. If it weren't, there wouldn't be wars fought, and all of the billions of dollars spent, or the infinite amount of hours vested towards directing our attention. If humans weren't so effing powerful, why would so many people be spending so much time, effort, and energy into directing our focus? And specifically, why would they be spending all that time, effort, and energy directing it into fear? Like into a negative state, into a lower state, to where we can't even make any kind of a decision because the sky is just about to fall at any given moment. I lived a good part of my life in that state of mind, and it like, I'm still undoing the effects of living that way, and
It's stifling. We're going to come back to that. Let's say that this lower attribute or center, again, seeking expression, gives people thoughts and ideas and hands them all sorts of rituals, which may be a way of directing their conscious focus toward bringing this thing about. A lot of, maybe some people scoff at the idea of that, like, oh, occult rituals or hooped on. A lot of people and a lot of Christians are very, very put off by that. Don't want to understand it. All rituals are of the devil. Well, the ones that we're speaking of, the one that I'm alluding to now, or set of rituals, I don't know. I don't participate in them, at least not consciously. One could argue that we're all participating in them, especially if we consume certain things in the little black box. The TV,
absolutely,
just projecting images all the time, maybe getting us to participate unwittingly, unknowingly in their rituals. And then it also seems from my study that a lot of the people, the powers that should not be in this world, believe very much in it.
Oh, you can't argue
that the symbols of the beast are everywhere. So to them, perhaps, like, it is not a joke. It's very real. And perhaps they have been led astray and given rise so much to their lower faculties, again, if things that govern physicality and power, that they consciously participate in the rituals and maybe perhaps do bring about a physical manifestation or representation of this adversarial force that we call Satan or Lucifer or Ahriman, or what have you, these different things. So in that way, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Was it this alien entity thing that is seeking expression through people and entering them via their lower faculties, and perhaps higher faculties too, if it exists in the mind, then it seeps through all systems. Again, man, let's not demonize our bodies and our inner sanctums of faculties here. They serve a purpose. Gravity is an exceptional function of this reality. It's not meant to necessarily be bucked against. It's meant to work with. Same in the way that our angers and our fears are not things that ought to be bastardized, but things to be utilized within us. But again, everything in balance, everything in flux.
To me, probably of the 2 or 3 books that come to mind that really like blew the lid off of this whole devil character for me. The first one was most definitely Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And anyone that's watching this, if you've never heard of that book, yes, that book right there. That is
fantastic.
I've probably read it 4 or 5 times now. I would read it again if I had it here. It's
I wish I could find fantastic. Where the devil describes what
it's in the very beginning. It's in the very beginning. You get into right when Hill really starts to get into the actual interview. And I was just going to say, in that book, you can choose to believe how it's written, and how it's written is that Napoleon Hill literally interviews the actual devil. And he explains how they did it and how he came to his answers. But once you read through the material, it's pretty difficult to deny that that's a it'd be a pretty fair representation of what I would think of as the devil. And spoiler alert, he's not nearly as unlikable as as you might expect. And his description of himself to me is the one that resonates the most true with me, which is that he is the negative charge. Like we live in a dual universe. There is a positive charge and there is a negative charge. He is the negative charge. He's the projector. He's that which brings order out of the chaos. It's supremely masculine force. Hence, they call him the light bearer. Or a lot of people, a lot of occult traditions refer to this entity as that. So, I think when you read through that book, you'll find that, well, the devil doesn't actually do anything to anybody. We make choices, and maybe he presents a very shiny, sexy looking door to walk through, and we do that. But the devil is us, man. I mean, that to me, that is what it is, and it's our darkness, that which we refuse to acknowledge that we have the capacity for. And that's how we keep finding ourselves in these situations, both individually and as an aggregate, where our darkness, because we've ignored it and stuffed it down and pretended like that's not me, that's somebody else. It's always out here, right? It's always at the end of my finger pointing away from me. It's never looking back or pointing at the reflection. But that book, and the second book that I would suggest, which is extremely interesting, is Robert Seffer's 1666. That's really a little bit less about the devil and a whole lot more about where Satanism came from. And if I were the devil, I would definitely pick the three characters that pretty much single-handedly brought us the religion that we call Satanism. And like even it was this major split in Judaism that gave rise to this, and it was this guy Sabbatai Zevi, which Sabbatai means Saturn in Hebrew. And so he said that he was the embodiment of of Satan on earth, and his mantra was do whatever. The more profane, do whatever thou willst. To the more profane the better, because the way you find God is by experience. And what he was pushing was the more profane your experience, the more likely you are to to get back to God. And it was actually through sin you will be delivered. That was one of their big mantras. But it came out of Zoroastrianism, which is like came out of Iran or that area of the Middle East. And so we're dealing with something that is really relatively not that old in terms of a religion, if you want to talk about Satanism. But true Satanism isn't the worship of Satan. It's basically the antithesis of Christianity. It's everything that we would think of as Christ or Christ-like inverted. And I think it's worth noting that in our studies into law, the powers that shouldn't be have inverted everything in law, in God's law, and turned it in, like they had turned the land into water. And so we're operating, even though we're walking on the land, the system of law that we're operating under is an admiralty. Well, it's a hybrid. It's not even true admiralty. It's like a colorable admiralty, which is the inversion of land. It's turning everything into water. And that's why all the water words are in our legal system. And so there's no mistaking there. But I think when you look at like a globalist agenda, if we want to don our tinfoil hats for a minute, the globalists are doing everything they can to turn things upside down, to blend it, right? There is no gender. There's whatever you want, whatever you feel like. It's cool. You can feel like a woman, you can be a woman. That's totally fine. Because ultimately, what the real ritual is centered around the complete debasement, the complete embarrassment or shaming, or any number of words that you can put in that. That's what they're doing. That's their ritual, right? Is they're laying you before everyone and they're completely debasing you. I mean, you look at the I don't know, you look at the Katy Perry halftime show, and like in people, or that, what was the most recent one that was even more ridiculous, at the Oscars or whatever, where it was the Sam Smith, you know, and it was like so.
Oh, that one a few years ago.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like so obviously satanic in
So
nature.
it's very obvious and in our faces. It's a multifold thing of insensitizing us to these rituals that are shoved down our throats, and us actively participating in them. If we're not a conscious observer and can see it for what it is, and choose to either uh, accept it consciously, God forbid, or reject it consciously, or again, God forbid, not see it at all, and subconsciously it seeps in and it plays out in our minds. And unless we're making conscious choices in our life, the subconscious is running the program. I talk about this all the time. Many people do, much wiser than I. Yes, it's absolutely it's this blatant debasement, and you described it very well, inversion of everything. They've taken all of the holy concepts. I mean, even here as I'm describing Saturn, people it's giving thoughts and concepts like Satan, immediately taking them to places of evil, because that's how they're bastardizing these lower forces and enacting them out, when these things are divine, helpful tools. All thing is divine, all is God, various spectrums of it. Anger, fear, not that these things are, well, it's hard for me to even conceptualize that. I even almost said things like lust and greed, but it's hard to equate that to God. But if all is God, then I don't know. Then maybe God's got some explaining to do too. I think, in summation, when we use the word God or creator or force, we are describing the forces of light, because all is light. I choose to believe there is really no such thing as darkness. There's just the appearance of darkness by the shadowing of light. There's really no absence of light.
That's right.
But these are really heady concepts, guys, and I'm not a very articulate person in the way that I would like to be, in the way that I admire some other people to being. I'm a songwriter, and I tend to do better when I spend times with things and writing them down. But I enjoy this podcast format so much. Bear with me, and if I repeat myself a lot, just imagine how many times I've heard it from. So, would you like me to read here? I found
Yes.
what we were looking for in this book, and really we could do a whole podcast just reading a chapter of this book.
The book is
but
amazing.
I found three different spots, and first, this is in the beginning when the interview kicks off, and the interviewer, Napoleon Hill. Again, this was 1938 that this was written, 1938, which I think will become even more profound as we get to some later things. So on page 62, one of his first questions, Napoleon Hill asks the devil, "Tell me something more about the world in which you live." "I live wherever I choose," answers the devil. "Time and space do not exist for me. I am a force best described to you as energy. My favorite physical dwelling place, as I have told you, is the minds of the earthbound. I control a part of the brain space of every human being. The amount of space I occupy in each individual's mind depends on how little and what sort of thinking that person does. As I have told you, I cannot entirely control any person who thinks."
So think about now, having read that, think about what has happened to, in my lifetime. I have watched the systematic dumbing down of the population through, well, and I'm going to use this term incredibly loosely, education, in the public miseducation system, through food, through all of the chemicals that are in everything from, our clothing to the houses that we live in, to our air, that is being polluted with, I'm just going to say it, with chemtrails and radio frequencies, or frequency that in any other application would be used to cook food, and that's what 5G is. It's the same thing that's in your microwave oven. There's all these different ways that we're being bombarded constantly with things that degrade our ability and retard our abilities to be a fully functioning human. And as I said in the previous discussion, we don't know what a fully functioning human is. We've never actually seen one. So if they can, when I say they, the powers that be, if they can dumb us down enough, well, the rest is going to be really easy, right? Because you just tell the herd to go this way, and the herd does, and it exposes the few that are left that think.
I'm gonna go ahead to page 107 here.
Sure.
107.
That's coincidence, I'm sure.
So the question. Okay. Anyway, Napoleon Hill's question. I don't know what they were talking about before. I'll probably reread this for the fourth time, y'all, because I love this book. Oh my goodness, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, one of the best-selling books of all time. He said, his question, your explanation clears up the matter. Now go ahead and tell me some of your other tricks with which you allure people into drifting. Drifting is, by the way, to sum up, drifting is what we've been alluding to here. Passive thinking.
Distraction.
Inactivity in one's own life. Distraction, yeah, overall drifting. They do define it outright, but anyway, I digress. This was like an aha for what we were talking about. So the devil's answers for one of his other tricks with which he lures people into drifting. One of my most effective tricks is known to you as propaganda. This is 1938, y'all. This is the instrument of greatest value to me in setting people to murdering one another under the guise of war. The cleverness of this trick consists mainly of the subtlety with which I use it. I mix propaganda with the news of the world. I have it taught in public and private schools. I see that it finds its way into the pulpit. I color moving pictures with it. I see that it enters every home where there is a radio. This before TVs. I inject it into the billboard, newspaper, and radio advertising. I spread it in every place of business where people work. I use it to fill the divorce courts, and I make it serve to destroy business and industry. It is my chief instrument for starting runs on banks. My propagandists cover the world so thoroughly that I can start epidemics of disease, turn loose the dogs of war, or throw business into a panic at will.
And another thing that was really interesting is right when that whole story first starts, right where it first starts, he goes down a list that he's like very smug, right, and he demands that Hill call him Your Highness.
Oh yeah, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty, that's it, right? And so he's talking about how he's tricked the entire population into smoking cigarettes, and that they're going to go from smoking one pack of cigarettes to 2 or 3, and like women are they're going to fancy it, and like he predicted what absolutely came true, and this rich diet that he's going to get people to become obese and slow of thought because they're just so in all this rich food. And you look around and and the section that he talks, there's like a 2-page part where he says what we should teach children as opposed to what children are taught in school.
Yes.
Man.
Yes.
I wanted to like write that on my wall. It was that section is so powerful.
I'm going to reread this thing again for like the 4th time through because it's an easy read too.
Real
easy.
It's not. Yeah, it's a real easy read. It's very compelling.
So on page 134 while we're on it, and then I'll put the book down. Napoleon Hill's question. That reminds me to ask you to tell me more about yourself. Where, in addition to the minds of people, do you dwell and answer? I operate wherever there is something I can control and appropriate. I have already told you that I am the negative portion of the electron of matter. I am the explosion in lightning. I am the pain in disease and physical suffering. I am the unseen general in warfare. I am the unknown commissioner of poverty and famine. I am the executioner extraordinaire at death. I am the inspirer of lust after the flesh. I am the creator of jealousy and envy and greed. I am the instigator of fear. I am the genius who converts the achievements of men of science into instruments of death. I am the destroyer of harmony in all manner of human relationships. I am the antithesis of justice. I am the driving force in all immorality. I am the stalemate of all good. I am anxiety, suspense, superstition, and insanity. I am the destroyer of hope and faith. I am the inspirer of destructive gossip and scandal. I am the discourager of free and independent thought. In brief, I am the creator of all forms of human misery, the instigator of discouragement and disappointment. And then Napoleon's question, and you do not call that cold and cruel? Answer, I call that definite and dependable.
Yeah. Pretty hard to refute that, right? And again, it's written in such a way that you have to choose to believe is this fact or fiction. And really, it's irrelevant because the material is so powerful that you walk away from it going, no, man, there's a lot of truth here. What is being said is really resonates and feels honest. And that's why it took that manuscript like 70 years to actually be published. It was like a hot potato passed around in his family because it was very damning of religion, of of all of the structures that society.
Yes, incredibly damning of religion and Christianity
Specifically, yes.
Specifically, which makes sense because specifically it was a traditionally Christian audience, where and the idea in Christianity was that it was, I wish I could find that too to read it to the people perhaps another time, that the idea was making this idea of the devil so scary and external of one's being that they didn't want to look at it as this thing that was other than, rather than owning these aspects. And this is my generalization, summation of what he was saying, but that it would seep in fear and ignorance, not seeking to understand because of the dogma, believing that is ungodlike, that is blaspheme to God to try to seek to understand something.
Sure.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Church was one of his favorite places.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. How dare you use the faculties that God gave you to discern truth?
This age is about done.
Well, all right. Thank y'all. And you all have a fantastic week. We'll catch you on the next time. If you enjoyed the following clip from the Uber Mentioned podcast, like, subscribe, and check out the whole episode in the links below.